Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Easter. All right, are we ready? He is risen. Ah, a few even got the "He is risen indeed" part. That's so old school. All right, let's do it again. He is risen. He is risen indeed. So I did that. I greeted someone like that in the morning, and I said, "He is risen," and I was waiting for "He is risen indeed," and they said, "And the tomb is empty." And I was like, I like that. That might be for next year. I might be switching it out. Did anybody else grow up with "and the tomb is empty"? That's amazing. I absolutely. So he is risen indeed, and the tomb is empty. So thank you guys so much for coming on out to our Easter worship service. So my dad has a friend who is a crab cake thief. And this was somewhat disturbing to me. So my dad's now living as a snowbird down in Florida. And Cheryl and I, we went down there around Valentine's Day to hang out with him and a bunch of his friends. And he's got a ton of friends down there. And so they made reservations at this really nice, expensive, very swanky kind of looking, this seafood place. And it was great. I mean, the food was absolutely amazing. And my wife and I are like the youngest people there, because it's Florida. And so we were like the youngest people. I know some of the young people here are like, really, you were the youngest? Uh-huh. No, but like it happens down there. And so we were eating and enjoying it. And Cheryl and I, we ordered more than enough food for the two of us, and we love leftovers. And we love leftovers because my wife is like a leftover genius. She gets often the leftovers are better than they were when we had it at the restaurant, because she does magic stuff to it, and it's really incredible. And so we always love packing up leftovers when we're at these restaurants. And so the meal is kind of wrapping up, coming to an end, and we still have a giant crab cake left. We'd already shared one, and we have this giant crab cake left, and it was amazing the first time. I'm like, this is gonna be so good. It's like another meal tomorrow. And so we're wrapping up, and somebody says, "Hey, are you guys gonna eat that?" Well, eventually. Like, you mean like right now? And so we kind of felt like half obligated to offer it to the table, right? Hey, is anyone still hungry down there, in this long table? Some dude from all the way down at the other, I hadn't even seen him all night. I'm not even sure he was with our party. No, I think he was with our party, but he was all the way down at the other end of the table. And he's like, yeah, I'll take it. I was like, all right, whatever. I guess it's the right thing to do, like the Christian thing. I was like, well, it's better to let him eat it. Maybe he had a soup or something and he's actually still hungry. It's an expensive restaurant. It's probably the right thing to. So here I go. I watch this crab cake just go down the table in front of me. I'm like, bye. So, but you know what? Whatever. He's hungry. Let him eat it. Gets down to him. And he reaches under his seat and he pulls out, He pulls out his to-go container that's already stuffed to the gills. He's been collecting food all night. And I didn't know that because he was hiding on the other side of the table. I'm like, you come face me direct before. No, he's hiding on the other side. He takes our crab cake. He's not intending to eat it. He slips that thing right in there. And I was like, he had to cram it in. It's deformed now. And I was like, I cannot believe it. I'm like, the dude just stole our crab cake right in front of everybody. No one seems offended by this. And so, I was like, obviously, I wanted to have words with him, but he was older. And I figured that's probably not a good thing to do. And it's Valentine's and my dad and my wife and a lot of other reasons. But anyway, I'm sitting there thinking about it. And later on, I asked my dad, I'm like, hey, Dad, who's the dude with the giant pile of food? And I got to hear a little bit of his story. But apparently, the guy, this is who he is. He knows how to work the system. And this guy is just always, he's like his whole life, his whole career, he's a hustler. He gets in there. He works real hard. He knows the angles. He gets the system. He figures things out. And he walks home with a giant pile of awesome free food. And this is who he is. And I asked him, my dad is telling me his kind of a little bit of his story. I'm like, you got to respect a guy like that. You know, like, this is all right. Like, this dude, all these years later, he's really, he got it going on, man. And I was like, all right, some respect. I can handle that, right? Because hustle sounds like this incredibly awesome thing. And of course, it is. And I like to think of myself as kind of a hustler. Like I've hustled ever since I was a kid. I had my hustle and I had my side hustle. Any side hustle people here? We got a bunch of side hustle? Yeah. So I always have a hustle and a side hustle. My wife's got her hustle and a side hustle. One time, this years ago, we started the church. We had like 4 of us. Then there were like 8. Then there were 12. Then there were 20. And then when there were like 20 of us. One day I went around the room and I realized almost everybody there had a job, a hustle, and a side hustle. I'm like, the whole church, they're starting the church on the hustlers. This is it. Like, this is who we need. This church is going to accomplish great things because we got all the right people, all the side hustlers in the room. This is going to be absolutely amazing. I love using technology. Any way that I can get technology to help me get more done in less time, I absolutely love it. I mean, why? Why is it? Why do we want to do more in less time? Why? So we can do more, right? Why else? Vacation stuff. No, you want to do more in less time so we can do more with the time that we have just saved. To me, this is the way the world ought to work. So I understand. I love this. I think this is great. I was talking to a staff person just really recently, actually, and I was explaining a job that I wanted done, a particular job that I was kind of tasking them with. And after I kind of explained what I wanted and the parameters of the project, they said to me, so wait, they had this quizzical look, and they said, let me see if I understand you. You want me to do more with less money and less time? Yeah, like I felt so understood. I felt loved in that moment. I was like, finally, we're getting it. This is exactly right. Do more, less time, less money, because you need to hustle. You need to get it moving. And then we send out this postcard to a ton of people, which surprisingly didn't get nearly as many "you're offensive people" letters as I expected. But if you're here today to see why this church is so doing stuff like that for Easter, then you could totally send me an email about it. It's trevor@beacon.church. Just let me know what your heart is on it. And we sent out this postcard, and we're trying to send the hustle back to hell. So why? I thought hustle could be a good thing, and of course it can be. It can be a great thing until it's not. And when it's not, it becomes the most tyrannical master that has ever been. American workers are constantly reporting low levels of well-being, and they're showing signs of burnout. Forbes magazine, they did a massive study across 7 countries, thousands of knowledge workers. They found that 70% of the people felt burnt out. The younger generations, Gen Z, 87% are feeling overwhelmed and burning out. Grade school, high school students are in an emotional free fall. College students, 70% are reporting low levels of well-being, and that's manifesting in anxiety and depression and social isolation and all sorts of unhealthy coping mechanisms like drinking and drugs and binge drinking. And so call it what you want. Call it anxiety, or call it burnout, or call it emotional exhaustion, or chronic unmitigated stress. I love that description. Chronic unmitigated stress. Call it what you want. I'm calling it altogether the hellish hustle. That's what I'm naming it. It's the hellish hustle. And so maybe for you it shows up because you're just tired all the time. It's harder and harder to peel your butt out of bed because you're just feeling exhausted. Maybe your body's starting to break down in some other ways. There's Dr. Christina Maslach, and listen to this. This is her title. She's a social psychologist at the University of California in Berkeley. All right, so she's like up there. She's high ranked, super smart, and she has spent her career studying burnout. And her conclusion is that our bodies were not designed for the kinds of stressors that we face today. Something has fundamentally shifted with all of our progress, and our bodies weren't made for it, which is why they're breaking down in increasingly despairing ways, insomnia and physical exhaustions and headaches and stomach aches and all sorts of other types of diseases. Or maybe that's not you. Maybe you're feeling it because you're just more angry all the time. You know, when we're lashing out more than we might have before, it can often be a symptom of emotional exhaustion. We just don't have the filters that we once had. Or it might be what you think about when you hear this interviewer from the BBC. They actually interviewed someone named Professor Sherry Turkle. Now, if you thought the first doctor had an impressive resume, this is what Professor Sherry Turkle, this is her business card. She needs 2 business cards. She's a social theorist and the founder and director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Initiative on Technology and Self. Whew, that's information overload right there. But this, so largely what she does is she studies computers, technology, and people. And she sees how they interact and tries to figure out what those interactions are doing to us. And she has come to the conclusion, and she argues that our interaction with technology, especially social media, it is making us emotionally lazy and insensitive to fellow human beings. This is the hellish hustle. Maybe you feel numb. Maybe you have a nasty dose of learned helplessness. First responders and counselors and clergy across the country are experiencing this in an increasing way, dropping like flies. There's a psychology professor at Kent State University, Angela Neal Barnett, and she wrote a book called Soothe Your Nerves, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding and Overcoming Anxiety, Panic, and Fear. And here's how she captured it. She said, people in a state of chronic stress often become despondent and defiant. People say, it just doesn't matter to me anymore. Or, do what you may, I don't care. We're getting worn down and beaten up by this hellish hustle. So let me tell you something. A vacation isn't going to fix this. You're not going to get away for a couple days a week. You're not going to take a little leave of absence. See, there's something deeper here. There's something more fundamental going on here, something desperately wrong with the way that we are allowing the values of the world to direct how we live and who we are. And we are going to need something deeper and more fundamental if we are going to send this hellish hustle back to where it came from. And into all of that, Jesus comes on the scene, and he offers us a ton of different promises, but this one hits me in a different way. This one hits me really in kind of a more unique way. It's in Matthew chapter 11. You guys want to pull that slide up for me. Matthew chapter 11, he says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." There is something about this promise, about the gentleness of Jesus and about the authenticity of the invitation to come and to take this yoke and this discussion. It just resonates somehow deeper in my soul than even many of the other promises there. And if there's any bit of that, if we just rest in that space for just a moment, is there anything in this promise that is starting to sort of resonate in your own soul and in your own experience? Is there a little bit of you that says, if this could actually be true, this would change everything? And it will. It'll change everything. So for much of human history, of course, everybody knew what a yoke was, but it dawned on me as we were talking about this that many of us may have never even seen a yoke, unless you go to like Amish country or something like that. And so we needed a yoke. And so Trevor built us a yoke. And I'm really happy about it because I've been wanting a yoke for a long time. And so Trevor built me a yoke. And the way it works, of course, is this is a single yoke designed primarily for an animal, a beast of burden. And so this would be it. You would strap this to an ox or a donkey or something like that. And then you would attach the yoke to like a wagon or to a plow, and that would let you use the animal's strength to carry heavy burdens and to do heavy work. And so this would be the yoke that everybody in Jesus' day would have known. And in fact, most everyone around the world today would still know what these are, because many of them are still living with the kind of a culture where this is a big part of the world that they see. Animals yoked up like this. But in many parts of the world, even today, it's not just animals who use yokes. People do. And they use them because there's not always an easy road to use a wagon and a wheel on. And so instead, they use a yoke to go down to the river and get water and bring it back to their kids. And they have a big pile of seed out in the field that they've collected, or grapes or produce, and they have a yoke. And then what they do is they attach ropes and baskets down the sides of the yoke. You can get in there and you can lift up a massive amount of weight because you're using all of your strongest muscles. And so you're actually able to be far more productive with the use of a yoke than simply trying to carry a couple of things in your arms. And so all around the world, people are using yokes, and they are still to this day. Now, because of that, it also started to be used metaphorically. And this is where we start to get into some very difficult kinds of thoughts and ideas, because if a foreign country came in, invaded your people, taxed you heavily, oppressed you, started pillaging, it said that you would be under their yoke. You would be under their oppression. See, if you serve them, then they have a yoke upon your neck. But even metaphorically, it wasn't simply used negative. You see, it's always possible for this term, this phrase, this idea to be positive and negative with the animal yoke and with a human yoke, and even now metaphorically, because the rabbis used to talk about the yoke of the Torah as an awesome gift, that you could replace the yoke of flesh and blood and put on a yoke of heaven. And so this idea that something is weighing you down, this imagery becomes a very important part of explaining our relationship to the world and to Jesus. Now, here is where things are going to get a little hard for American ears. Because according to the scriptures, everyone already carries a yoke. Everyone. And you say, whoa. If Jesus is telling me I need to put a yoke on, I think I'll pass. Because like with me and all of my freedom and all of the, blood was spilled in this country so that we could have autonomy and freedom. And I'm certainly not going to put my neck under a yoke now after all that hard-won freedom. And Jesus is saying, no, you're missing the point. When Jesus says there is a burden, this is yoke language. Come to me, all you who are weary and carry a heavy burden. You already carry a yoke. That's the point that Jesus makes. You already are carrying a yoke. There was a woman, Mi Ling, and when she was young, she was arrested in China because she was part of the underground church and she was spreading the teachings of Jesus. That's illegal, and so she was arrested and interrogated, which is, of course, tortured. And so she's being tortured in China to give up the names of the other people that are in the underground church with her. And she was young and terrified. She said it was one of the most frightening kinds of experiences that a person could ever endure. And so what happening is that they asked her, how did you keep going in the face of this torture and these ongoing interrogations? And she says, well, at first, I just kept my eyes shut because I couldn't see the tools they were using to inflict pain, and I couldn't see their angry faces. And by keeping her eyes shut, she was just able to get by and endure the pain just a little bit better. Then she said, but something shifted. I started remembering a Bible verse, and I started quoting it back to myself and repeating it over and over and over again. And she repeated a verse from the Beatitudes where it says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And then very slowly, as she continued to sit with this idea, with this great truth, in her own words, she said, "When I purified my heart of the fear of men, I learned to really see God." She carried a yoke of the world, the fear of men. Who wouldn't? The fear of being tortured, the fear of death, the fear of pain. And through a process of reflecting on the promises of God, she was able to replace the yoke of the fear of men with another yoke, a yoke of heaven that gave her strength and endurance. Now, eventually, her captors realized that she was closing her eyes as a way of dealing with the horror of what was going on, and so they taped her eyes open, forcing her to see the tools and the angry faces to try to increase the terror of what it was she was going through. But Mi Ling said that it was too late, because again, in her words, her vision was now secure. It was too late for them, because the yoke of the fear of men had been replaced with a heavenly yoke. What the Bible makes clear over and over and over again, it's not a question of whether you will wear a yoke. It's which yoke you will wear. You will wear a yoke, and you do wear a yoke. And part of the hellish hustle that you are experiencing is because you're wearing a yoke of flesh and blood, and even worse. See, whatever you love, whatever you fear, whatever you feel like you can't live without, if you think, I can't live without blank, you fill that in and you're starting to get a taste of what your yoke in this world might be. Now, I needed a volunteer. I asked June to come up and help me. So June, come on up, work your way up here. Everybody give June a big round of applause for coming on up and being a guinea pig with us. Now, June's going to help me try to make a point here that I think is important because for many of us, we're trying to figure this out. We're like, I'm weary and I'm burdened, but if I just get a little bit of a rest, you just come over here for now, buddy. And if I could just get a little rest, but then suddenly these things seem to somehow impact us more deeply, more in a way that doesn't even make sense as far as the challenge that we're currently facing. See, they seem to have a different kind of power, and that's because I want to make the argument that being weary and burdened is like getting a taste of death. When Jesus says that you're weary and burdened, it isn't just that you're feeling a little bit fatigued. There's something deeper at work, something more insidious at work than simply being a little spent. This is why it's a hellish kind of a hustle. And it goes all the way back to Genesis 3. So the Bible begins in Genesis, and it's chapters 1 and 2. It's like 2 pages, and then Genesis 3. So this is as early as we can get in the story of humanity. And God puts them in the garden. He says, don't eat of the tree. He says, because you ate of it, because Adam and Eve sinned, they ate of it. From the tree about which I commanded you, God says, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. See, work was supposed to be a good thing, but it became painful toil. Sounds a whole lot like weary and burdened, heavy burden. And then he goes on to say, it will produce thorns and thistles, the land, for you. And by the sweat of your brow, you will eat of your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. And so because of humanity's rebellion, because of our sin, because of our willingness to throw off the yoke of God and to fashion a yoke of our own making, we gave hell and death entry into our experiences. And that makes our toil lead to ashes, dust to dust. All right, so we're gonna have, of course you're gonna be wearing the yoke, right? You know that. All right, so here we go. This is why I picked June, because June fills out this yoke way, way better than most of us would. Man, you do fill that thing out. You look good. All right. So, this is the idea, right? At first, you think to yourself, it's just a yoke. Like, this is what everybody, I get up, I work hard, I make it go, I try to go, my kids, I got the problem of the wife, the thing, the marriage, I got a problem with the car. And so we're like, but this is just normal burdens. Like, we're all just having to wear the yoke because we're human. But it doesn't quite feel that way. And so could I ask you to kind of grab me a rope over here? Actually, you could do this one right here. There's a loop, and it's tied to the chair, so don't try to pull the whole thing. You'll pull the whole chair. And so it's as if, thank you, it's as if you take these tendrils, right? And so hell has been breaking into our experience. And this is going to sound a little bit corny at first, but just stay with me. When you get a cold, when you're sniffling, that's a little taste of death. You're like, come on, it's a cold. Don't be so dramatic. I know for some of you, a cold does feel like death. But like, no. Like my wife would say, no, it looks like my husband's dying when he gets a cold. But no, but think about it for a second, right? You get sick, but it's not the way it was supposed to be. And most all of us will die because of our last illness. The cold is just a taste of what is to come. This is why we're spiraling downward in our health until we become dust again. And so it isn't just that we have a cold and it's one of the things. Something from deep inside of hell and death is attaching itself to our yoke. And it's actually now pulling with greater weight. But it's not just our physical bodies. It's way more than that as well. So let's take this one here. You want to bring me up the marriage one? This is a marriage tendril coming straight out of hell. I hate the metaphor, the fact that you guys are all down there with the tendrils of hell, but there it is. That's the metaphor. I can't escape it now. And so you take marriage. Marriage was supposed to be this unbelievable, incredible gift, right? It was supposed to help complete us, and the two became one flesh, and it was supposed to be a picture of Jesus and the church. And so when you look at a marriage, you go, oh, look, this is a picture of how much Jesus loved the church. And some of you are like, yes, that's exactly what my marriage is like. Husbands, do not laugh at that. Yes, that's exactly what it's like. My wife, a spotless bride. Yes, you're like Jesus, spotless. You're like, and wife's like, yeah. And so it's not just a marriage. So marriage that was supposed to be something isn't what it is. And now with all of the heartache and all of the frustration and the betrayals, and now we realize there is no one that could hurt us like that. And the reach of hell has infected our marriages, and it's adding a weight, a hellish kind of weight. Marriage is tough. So Mary O'Grady, she goes into church one morning, and the priest sees her, and the father says, oh, Mary, you look so sad. Are you okay? And Mary says, oh, no, Father, I'm not feeling, this is my Irish accent. Oh, no, Father, I'm not feeling so good at all. I'm very, very sad. And the father says to her, oh, Mary, why are you so sad? And she says, well, because of terrible news, my husband, he died this week. And the priest was like, oh my goodness, Mary, I'm so sorry. You must be so sad. And she went, well, yes, Father, it's very, very sad. And the priest says, Mary, was there anything that he wanted? Was there any last request? Anything that he said before he died? And Mary says, oh yes, Father. What was it, Mary? And Mary says, he said, Mary, you put down that gun. But it's not just that one. Can I have this one as well? Because marriage is tough, and we all understand it. But it's not just that, right? Because now you think about your relationships and about your community, and it was supposed to, and every once in a while you get a little taste of community, and you're like, oh, this is beautiful, my friends, my family, we're supposed to be supporting, and all of a sudden you feel betrayed, and you feel like, and you start to see, and this happened all in Genesis, by the way, all of these things that I'm talking about happen right after Genesis 3 gets underway, and it goes on for chapter after chapter, and all of a sudden the tendrils of hell are starting to reach up and attach themselves. And so you want to give me this last tendril over here? And this, when you think about it now, it starts to bring something into a little bit more focus and a little bit more clarity for us. right? And you can do this with so many things. Thank you, Ann. You can do this with so many different things. Think through everything in your life the way it ought to have been. So you think through our sexuality. It was supposed to be incredible. It was going to be bond two people together in this unique and incredible way, and it's sacred in so many ways. And then we cheapen it, and we make it something it isn't supposed to be, and all of a sudden we start to see parts of our soul die. It's because hell has tainted. It's reaching into our experience and it's attaching itself. So it's no longer just the normal burdens, but it's more deeper existential than any of that. And it's putting a heavier weight on all of our shoulders. This is why getting a vacation and taking a nap and trying to do a few quick fixes, they're not going to fix it. We need something far more drastic. Now, here's the kicker. You know what happens when we start feeling this pressure? You want to know what our first defensive mechanism is when we start feeling this pressure pulling us down, trying to draw us right into the very gates of hell? You know what we do? We hustle. We work harder. We try more. This is what we do. If I can just figure it out, if I can just get the schedule, if I can just talk to my boss, we hustle. We try to use our own strength and our own efforts, and and then we're twice burdened. Because when we fail, we go, now I tried and I couldn't. The hustle itself becomes a tendril that comes right from hell. Now, if you want true rest, then we have got to reject this hellish yoke of hustle, and we have got to take on the yoke of Jesus. He says to us, listen, you are weary and burdened. And this is the taste of death. It's almost like a promissory note that death is coming for you. That hell that's reaching up now, you'll experience more fully and completely as your body decays and your relationships unravel and people that you love die around you, and you get more and more of these tastes of hell and death. And Jesus, in all of the boldness that comes with being the Son of God, he gets to come on the scene and he says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. And when he says this, think about this, come to me, come to me. He's not saying to us simply, hey guys, listen, I need you to join in the Jesus movement and follow a whole lot of rules and strategies. He says, come to me. Deeply personal. Christians, we talk about this idea of having a personal relationship. It's because Jesus sees our yoke and he's like, this will never do for my children. Come to me. Let me do this work of casting off all of these tendrils of hell that have attached themselves to you. Come to me. And then he says, take my yoke, which is so beautiful because this idea gives you full freedom. He's not saying, I'm going to put my yoke on you. He's saying, listen, you know what it's like to live in this world, and you know how it has been breaking your back. And I am telling you, I'm offering you. You can take up my yoke. You take up his yoke. He comes along and he says, listen, this is not the yoke that you were meant to bear. Yes, there is going to be work. Yes, there is going to be some struggle. Yes, but this isn't what you were meant to bear. This is straight from the pit of hell, and my children don't need that. This idea here for my yoke is easy to bear, most of the translations will try to struggle with this idea, and they'll say something like, my yoke is easy. But it doesn't make much sense because any of us who've walked with Jesus are like, it doesn't feel like an easy yoke. Easy isn't exactly how I would first describe it. And scholars have come to understand that what it means is that the yoke is easy to bear because it was made for you. It's a perfect fit. As if Jesus is saying, listen, what I've done is I have crafted for you a burden that you can bear. It doesn't have any of these attachments of hell to it. Those aren't a part of the burden I give you. What I've made for you, it's gonna fit perfect. It's gonna feel good. It's gonna be right. It can be hard and it can be heavy sometimes, but I am telling you, it fits like a glove. Like you know, it's Saturday morning, you're gonna go out and you're gonna do some yard work if you like yard work, that kind of a thing. And you pull on your favorite old work jeans that fit just right after all those years of work, and you get your favorite work boots and you strap those things on, your gloves. You're like, these are my best work gloves. And you're like, man, I got it ready. I'm ready to go. You get out there and you're like, I feel like I'm 20 again and I'm going to get out there and do all sorts of great work because these fit you. It's made for you. And when you're in that zone, the burdens and the hard work become a joy. And Jesus is like, I have a yoke for you that I have handcrafted for you, which is why it's going to be easy for you to bear. Easy for you to bear. Can we just thank our awesome yoke bearer for coming up here? Thank you, June, for carrying our yoke. People were getting nervous. How long can he carry that for? June's like an Iron Man. He could have done it for hours more. It's hard for us, though, not to picture what's going on here, right? The last thing he says is, the burden that I give you is light. I've thought a ton about this over the weeks, this idea that somehow this burden that he gives you can be light. And we look at this, and it's hard to miss the imagery. Scholars will tell us that the cross probably had the upright already in the ground. That when Jesus carried his cross to Golgotha, the place of the skull where he was crucified, he carried the crossbeam, which would have looked a whole lot like one big, ugly yoke. Not a yoke that was made for him, but one that he would stretch his arms out on and that his hands would be nailed into. And that would be hung on the upright. It's as if the imagery cries out for us to recognize that Jesus himself willingly picked up a yoke that was not his. He bent his back and he went under the burden of it, not one that fit him at all. In fact, the yoke that he bore was made for me. It was made for you. It was made because of our rebellion that stretches all the way back to the beginning of time with Genesis chapter 3. It was made for those who have decided to chart their course away from God and to make a yoke of their own hands, design. And Jesus is saying, I am going to lift that yoke. And when the tendrils of hell were pulling him relentlessly to death, he didn't fight. He willingly took it up. He's already gone before us. You want to know why it is he can make these claims that our yoke, that the yoke that he gives us is going to be light? It's because he's already done all of the heavy lifting of our yoke. And he didn't resist when it finally pulled him to death. And then on that resurrection morning, after having succumbed to death and the power of hell that we deserved, he breaks free from the tomb. And in that moment, he sends hell and death packing. And he says, it will not have any ultimate power over my people. By the way, this is why he can promise you rest, right? This is where it's all going. Come to me, all you are weary, and let me give you rest. This kind of a rest is something deep and profound. He's not talking about giving you a nap here, guys. He's not talking about that at all, although that might be the start of it for many of us. That might be the very thing that we need. But he's talking about something very different. You remember, right, when Jesus, after Jesus, he was crucified, died, buried, he went in the tomb, he was resurrected on Easter. That's what we celebrate today. And then sometime later, he ascended into heaven. He was lifted with the heavenly lifelines. And Trevor, in his magic, made me some lifelines as well. And so these are the heavenly lifelines. And so I look at these things and I think to myself, imagine now what it would be like. We talk about a heavy yoke, and you see people in this world who bear up under unbelievable burdens, and you think, how could they do it? And when they tell you how, they explain that it's because of Jesus, that they're able to endure things that they never imagined that they could endure because of what Jesus has done. It's Mi Ling sitting in a communist prison, being tortured, and she's just able to transcend. It's not even just simply that the burden that he gives is light, but he has already promised if it's his burden, he's putting his strength behind it. He is lifting it with you. You want to carry your own burden, carry it on your own. If you want to carry the burden that Jesus has for you, I promise you he will lift it with you. He will lift it with you, and one day these lifelines of heaven will bring you into the perfect peace. You will have rest now in the midst of your struggle. That's his promise to you. You will have rest now in the midst of broken relationships and failing health. Jesus meets you there and he gives you rest, something deeper, something more profound, something that is hard for you to even explain how it's happening and why it's happening. And then he tells you through the resurrection power, his power of life over death, him having experienced and tasted your death for you, and now in the power of the resurrection, he says, I will one day bring you into that perfect rest. The lifelines of heaven will come down and they will lift you into the very presence of God. And though you experience death, it is a temporary blip. A temporary blip. And the resurrection power that raised him from the dead will raise you and bring you into an eternal rest. And he makes this so clear. He cuts through all of this confusion and red tape and all of the hustle. And he says, listen, you want to do it? Come to me. Come to me. Surrender. Stop trying to do it your way. Trust me. I know what you were made for. I'm giving you a gift. Just come to me. Trust me. And I'll give you rest. Father, we are asking here this Easter morning, through the power of the resurrection, through this life immortal that you have given to us, that you have promised to us, Father, I'm praying that you would stir up hearts even now. The people who are sitting here, Lord, who have come, maybe maybe you were dragged out today from a family member, but Father, something here, you're stirring these hearts. And Lord, I'm just asking that you would continue this work and bring it to its completion, that heavy hearts and burdened souls, Lord, would come. They would come to you. They would simply take a step toward you in trust. You've given us this autonomy. You've given us this freedom to choose which yoke we will bear. And I'm praying, Lord, that we here today, we would take this promise and we would surrender to you. That we would surrender. That this promise of rest would be so profound and stirring in our hearts, Lord, that we would want nothing less than your perfect plan for our lives and this perfect rest that you have promised. We ask it all in the name of the resurrected Christ. Amen.